So when I was at Salve, I wrote and directed a few things there. And when I was graduating, it was sort of like, well, I don't want to now just stop, but I also didn't want to peddle my wares. Like, I didn't want to just go from community theater to community theater, like applying to direct
like I did.
whatever they happened to have on their docket. I didn't want to do like work for hire. I wanted to do stuff where I had total control because I'm a control freak. So, you know, I was talking with Jackie Yoon, and I was saying like, well, you know, yeah, I'd want to do this, I'd want to do that. And direct it and, you know, write it and all of this kind of stuff. And she was like, okay, so what's actually stopping you? And I'm like, well, nothing, just cowardice, I suppose. So we started talking about it and trying to figure out, well, what would we need to do? Well, you need some capital, and you need to, you know, you need to figure out who's your audience to start with, and you pick your first project because you want it to represent sort of what is it that you're going to be doing.
My sort of experience of watching sort of striving artists start was I was in college not knowing exactly that these conversations were happening. For Greg, I had thought, I'm going to graduate and start my bakery theater and start...
With Karen.
Yeah, with my cousin Karen, and thought, oh, that would be so great.
And by that time, 3 years had elapsed from when I graduated, so now you were graduating, and then you came on board. So then it kicked into gear, because I've always been sort of like the ideas guy with no practical application of any of that, or I'll be like, right, I have this thing, and I'm going to start to follow the muse, and I do whatever, and I get like 85% of the way there, and then I get distracted by something shiny, and you're left to sort of like get it to the finish line. Yeah, exactly, right.
Are you going to Scarborough? Parsley, cinnamon, rosemary, and thyme.
When we were choosing our first show, we were sort of thinking like, so what are we?
Well, and then I read in the paper about Matt and Ben, which at the time was happening in Boston. Matt Damon and Ben Affleck felt good about the show, but Miramax objected to the fact that there was dialogue from Good Will Hunting in it.
Yep.
So they sent a cease and desist, and Mindy Kaling and Brenda
Withers?
Yes. Their response was, when they got to the sequence where they were supposed to then perform dialogue from Good Will Hunting, they performed the cease and desist letter instead. And I thought that was the funniest thing I had ever heard of in my life, because I don't think there's 30 seconds in that show that doesn't have a laugh.
It's so funny.
It's just
It's
wall to wall funny. And
just silliness. And I think at the end of the day, when you try to sort of envision what your company is going to be, what your vision is going to be, I don't know that we necessarily knew that that was the direction that our company was going to.
It wasn't.
Kind
we were
of
going
go in.
to no. We were going to deliberately do the opposite.
Yeah.
We were going to try to continue to push buttons, because because as artistic director, that was what I had always done.
Right.
Jackie then took the bull by the horns and reached out to Mindy and Brenda's representation.
Yeah.
And said, I know this isn't available yet, but we're a startup. We're trying to do our first thing. We think that this is, you know, hilarious. And they agreed to let us do it, even though it wasn't available yet. So we were the first to do it, other than the two of them. And at the time, we felt like such badasses
we thought that was
pulling that off.
The greatest thing ever.
Yeah.
And as actors,
why didn't we invite them? Oh my God.
We just had a lot of fun, and I think that was just the only way to start as a company.
And the next thing that we wanted to establish was that we had sort of like this collection of writers. So we were trying to figure out, well, what do we want to start with? We had a pile of full-length plays, and we were trying to decide what to do. So the idea around Too Much Pudding was that it was kind of like a sampler, just stage readings of sections of each of them, and then try to get a sense of what did people respond to, what didn't they. We did a concert.
That was a lot of fun too.
Just to raise some more funds. What we were trying to do at the beginning was firmly establish, these are the different things that we can do.
Right.
We can do new contemporary works that are very funny. We write. We can
Yep.
do that. We have musicians, so we can do this, right? And then sort of film. I think
Yeah.
the very next thing
Yep.
that we did after that would have been
Tri
PT
Spy.
London and Tri Spy Tri. So I wasn't even there for that.
Well, we
I
didn't
could have
need
done
you
the film.
because it was an award-winning film.
PT London was a riff on
J.K. Rowling.
J.K. Rowling.
Yeah. And it was
And,
this famous writer that had this great book.
we were riffing on the notion of like the final book
Yeah.
in this very popular series coming out.
Right.
And that she had decided that she wanted to sever her contract with her publishing house.
Right. But
Right.
that film did win an award at the 48-Hour Film Project, which was
For your
super
performance.
exciting.
Can you recreate the look that won you?
So that was our first year.
Yeah, that's right. Year 2, Bupkiss.
We filmed a film called Effortless. This footage is very important. The first film I did with Striving Artists and I produced was award-winning.
Yes.
The
first one
second
that
film and the
right,
first film that Greg did,
I've disowned because it's terrible.
just putting it out there.
It's terrible.
Pat Hawkridge was teaching a scene study class. She was using the Ella Mossonary script, and I thought, like, oh, this is
That is
very
the kind
good.
of play that she would
And
know.
I
Yeah.
personally played the grandmother role, which I then cast Pat Hawkridge in when I directed it, and I just liked it. And sort of reflecting on Ella Mossonary, I had a completely different vision for what that was going to be in the end. When I watch like our footage from Ella Mossonary, I think like, that's not what I pictured at all. And as a
It
director,
never
you
is.
really,
It never
you
ever
really
is.
think like by the end product, you're going to say like,
Nope.
this was my gift to you, world.
No,
And it was
never.
like 75% there. It was there in
Really?
heart. It was there in spirit.
Oh,
But the actual
look. Yeah,
of
was
the
non-existent.
set itself was not
There was
quite
no
what I
set.
pictured. But it was our first shot of doing a full production
On our own
on
money.
our own, with our own money, without any help from anyone. So pretty good. I know, I'm sorry. Nobody will let me. Oh, the heck with it.
Kevin had worked at IT on, he wanted to do some old-fashioned radio shows. So I worked with him on that a little bit as an actor and got such a kick out of it that I was like, oh, we can do that. Plus, Mike was able to do the sound engineering on that, and it sounds really crisp. And the idea was that we would release these as podcasts once a month. And I put out that first one, and it landed with a thud. Okay. So you're not talking about stuff. It's a podcast, but you're not talking about
Right,
stuff. It's
right.
dramatic,
Yeah.
and there's sound effects and
Yeah.
music and stuff like that. And
More NPR.
you guys wrote it right, exactly. And
Yeah.
they were like, if that were just on something while I was sitting in the car listening
Yeah,
to the
listen
radio
to it,
anyway,
it's
great.
funny.
But I'm not going to seek it out,
Yeah,
which is a shame because they do sound very good. And
they do. But yeah, that
and
was
we
Sac
had some good
Sounds.
original writing in it too.
Yeah.
So so that was Sac Sounds.
My wife is a robot.
The next time that we did the 48-hour film project,
Yep.
it was like, right, comedy, no matter what.
Yeah.
We have to make it comedy. And we knew that we had Pat Aguiar. So we wrote
Our crown
Schmidt.
jewels.
Right, we wrote Dustin
Pat
Schmidt
Aguiar.
very much with him in mind.
Yeah.
And of course it was exactly in his wheelhouse.
Yeah. But we also had Ryan LePage, who
Ryan
was
LePage.
their friendship, having been since childhood, they got each other so perfectly
Yeah.
that there was no other Mitchell and Schmidt. So writing Schmidt's character towards Pat Aguiar, you knew that you had Ryan LePage.
Oh,
I'm
that he had to
sure
be
that
sort
there
of the straight
was,
guy, yeah.
Oh, okay, then we know Ryan LePage. We know how to write then Mitchell for this.
Pat could not memorize. He could not memorize, which is why there are no two shots in the movie. Pat
just couldn't
needed
remember.
to read
Yeah,
cue
bad
cards.
memory.
When I was filming the shot from behind, where Marin is in the center and you just see her hair, and the two of them on either side looking at her. Pat was like, I don't know, I had put the script directly in front of her on the table so that he could read it, and he was like, yeah, but for the sight line, shouldn't I be looking at her face? Can't we attach the script to her face? And you won't see it from behind, right? And that was like a jump the shark moment where we were both like, I don't even know how to respond to that suggestion. I don't have any idea what to say to you right now. No, we're not going to attach, with what? An elastic band? Are we going to tape it to her head? You know, like, it's insane.
Finally being able to utilize a lot of non-theater people too. That, yeah, Ryan did theater in high school, but he didn't then study it in college.
Well, we were just sort of mostly relying on the personalities that the people brought naturally, writing to their voice.
Exactly.
You know. So we did the second one. I wrote that alone. Matt advised against it. He was like, dude.
Matthew, our favorite sounding board on writing.
Oh yeah, well he
scale
was
us
like,
back.
come on, don't be reactionary. Don't just do another one because the first one was popular. But I feel good. I feel good about it technically. I think it. You know, it sounds better. It looks better.
Yeah, I thought it was great.
You know, and
I thought at the end of the day, it seemed like we want to see more of Mitchell and Schmidt. Like
sure,
this is now this like silly sitcom-y kind of style of characters.
it just wasn't quite as organically spontaneous as the first
Yeah.
one. When we did the 48-hour film project and we got musical, and I had sort of jokingly said to Matt beforehand, he was like, well, there's some of these genres I don't want to get. And I'm like, no, you just have to be creative with it. I mean, if we get sci-fi or something, then we just make it that a guy finds out that his wife turned out to be an android all along or something like that. And then like 10 minutes later, you or somebody called and you were like, okay, we got musical. And I'm like, a musical about a guy who finds out his wife was an android all along.
Perfect. Absolutely
and
perfect.
the song came out in no time at all.
My wife is a robot.
It's really funny.
Yeah.
The song is pretty catchy.
That's
you know,
great.
I feel
It's a
good
great-
about it.
great-
I wrote it with
great
Matt,
film.
and you know,
That's great.
yeah, we're pretty proud of that one. I
Yeah.
think. So at the time, Michelle, then Holmes, now Mercier, was pushing us to like, you need to plan at least a season out.
Yeah.
What the hell is wrong with you people? You know, and
it's so much work.
right, and we were like, I don't know. So
Christmas keeps it.
right, so she was like, well, there's the, you know, this is something that you could do, and
It's
it
something
started
holiday.
off as something. It was, do we want to adapt something that's in the public domain? Gift of the Magi was what we were looking
Oh
at.
yeah, that's right.
And I had some other material, and I was like, well, why don't we make Act 1 Magi and Act 2 some of our stuff? And then it just sort of felt like tone-wise,
It's too different.
it was just too jarring.
Yeah.
So we dumped the Magi idea, and
Yeah.
we just ended up going with our original stuff. And I was like, well, but now we don't have enough material to fill a whole show. We'll do some songs. We've got a bunch of singers. I've got my guitar. We'll do a bunch of songs.
It was very well received.
Well, it was the first opportunity for us to say, this is something that now we can plan.
Yeah.
We know we're going to do this again a year from now.
Right.
So we can start thinking about it now.
And it also really established breaking the fourth wall, which I think also Striving
Okay.
Artists is very well known
All right,
for.
yeah. So let's talk about that. So that was also the first time that I sort of said, what I want this to feel like is that the audience has been invited over to a Christmas party,
Right.
where like a few people go over to the piano, somebody tells a really funny story about
Yeah.
when they were a kid at Christmas or something like that, and that the audience shares in that experience. And it's meant to be that we're just sharing,
Yep.
you know. So Striving Through the Snow, you know, we amped it up. I had a bigger cast. It was, that I maintain as the strongest Christmas show that we've done. The material was really good. I came up with the framing device. It established really what the Christmas shows were going to be going
Yes,
forward.
definitely.
The music had more variety.
Yeah.
There was harmonies.
much
there was
more thought.
Ron playing other instruments with me so that I could
Mm-hmm.
be on piano and he was on guitar. My remaining Christmas shows after that were largely based on that one. What happened with Too Much Figgy Pudding that was interesting. Because I had singers who were coming from all over creation, I established this thing where I was like, you can't rehearse with me a whole bunch. I will record demos of what it needs to sound like so that you can have my piano track or guitar track to practice with at home. When that show was done, we were looking for ways that we could raise funds for the company. And it was, well, I've got these 12 songs in the can. I could flesh them out. I could bring in the singers who sang them in the show to recreate their parts that they did live. And then we can release a 12-song CD. I think that would be cool.
Yeah.
So many people came out of the woodwork. Oh, I'd love to sing on that. I know I wasn't available for the show, but could you add one more? 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 And then it ballooned into 50 songs and a double album. And, oh, our flautist, she wants to play on here. Okay, we can come up with a part for that. Oh, a horn section, we can add that. String section, sure, we can add that. So it ended up where the scope of it was enormous compared to the 12 track, where all I was going to be doing was replacing my vocals with other people's. People really enjoyed it,
really
and
well.
they liked the novelty of it.
And it was, again, a nod back to that
We do other stuff.
music. And that, yes, in our holiday shows, we always have music, but we had done concerts in the past, and now it was the actual recorded. You take striving artists home with you and listen to us in the car or while you're wrapping gifts. And then I started directing our Christmas shows, and Home for the Holidays was the first one that we did, and it was meant to be just come and tell one of your favorite stories from growing up in the holidays. And it was not stagey at all.
It wasn't really scripted.
Lots of sitting on the edge of the stage, lots of just hanging out on stage. It was not scripted.
It was getting back to the roots of what the intention was in the first place.
Yeah, what I was trying to accomplish as a director and as compiling the right pieces was, again, always funny, but my favorite thing to do as a director is, because the holidays are very stressful, and I think my gift to you, audience, is a Christmas cry, is a
Just sort of
holiday
get it out of your
cry.
system.
It's just get them to cry. Just let it out now to get you through the season. And anytime I sort of talk about that as a director, that's why I made those decisions. 'Tis the Season was, I worked out the kinks with the Home for the Holidays. I realized trying to involve too many people. 'Tis the Season was, I think, the ultimate representation of my personal Mary Beth feelings about the holidays, and then trying to make that vision of what I have going on through my head and my heart during the holidays onto the stage. And I was really, really, really satisfied and really proud of 'Tis the Season.
When I saw yours the first year, I mean, yeah, it was sort of, I had gone much slicker with my final, knowing it was my final Christmas show. I made snow globes really slick 5-part harmonies and more elaborate costumes and an actual set, but it was also more detached. I got the furthest away from connecting with the audience directly that year. You had brought the warmth back into it. And I feel like that continued through the other couple of years since then, and this most recent one when we then involved Savannah.
Hey ho, the wind and the rain, against these and names and
Much Ado About
Much
Nothing.
Ado About Nothing. So Bristol reached out to me and said, we want to do sort of super abbreviated versions of 3 Shakespeare shows. And suddenly it was only us.
Yeah.
For
Doing 2 weekends
all,
at
right, for the
Linden.
whole thing. I had cast a Benedict who got a paying gig 2 weeks before we opened. So I called Jeremy the next day. So we rehearsed with him for 10 days, maybe.
That was also our first time doing our summer Shakespeare. It came out of saying, well, they're basically going to fund this show. Why don't we tack on a few of our own weekends?
Right, we were like, well, so if I'm going to be spending my summer directing for another company, then my own company really should get something out of this.
Yeah.
So we added the performances of our own in Massachusetts afterwards, knowing it wasn't a conflict. I think for the most part, people enjoyed it. And what they enjoyed about it was the energy, which is something that then I tried to retain sort of going forward. I think there's Summer Shakespeare, that has expanded and grown over the years. We did Twelfth Night the second year, and I stuck much truer to the script, and I found the nice balance of sort of happy sad that I wanted those to have, and it was really, that was much better received than Much Ado. I felt like people felt really very connected to the characters, and that's when the sort of accessibility thing first started being thrown around of what are we doing with Shakespeare? We're making it very, very accessible
for
to
both the
people
audience and the actors. If what we as a company are constantly trying to do is break that fourth wall, that you have a little boy sitting on a ball on stage just enjoying the show.
Right, he just came right up on the stage.
Hey, this is great.
Didn't realize where the stage ended and where the audience began, and was just sitting up there with us.
And apparently
and
that's
then,
good.
like, when Jen and Jeremy kissed, he was just sort of like, oh, God, or something like that. And then that became the audience reacting to another audience member reacting to something. And then Jer and Jen chose to turn and interact with the kid about like, yeah, I know, I don't like kissing him either, or something like that. And him being like, it's the director's wife, I don't know what to tell you, you know. So by doing that, which is what Shakespeare did.
Right.
Like, it's not novel,
Yeah.
but so often when people do Shakespeare, and it's very presentational and sort of off-putting, you know what I mean? So it's not just that they connect, they care about what's going to happen to the characters. That's the whole point. We then, every year since then, have made more and more of an effort to connect directly. It makes a difference, it really does. They feel like they're a part of it, and they should, because we want them to.
Right.
You know, if they're not engaged, what are we doing it for?
Absolutely.
You know, when we did Shrew, I felt like, I don't know how to direct this. It's so misogynist.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do it.
I think you picked the right. You definitely picked whenever we do our Shakespeare, we try to pick a different era. You picked the last era, I think, for that to be appropriate.
I made the choice that it was collaborative. That when she gives the speech at the end about like, oh, I've learned my place and all of this kind of stuff, it's because they'll be set for life if she plays along with this, and that, you know, that they're co-conspirators and that kind of thing. And that somehow that really worked. And then Midsummer obviously is like the crown jewel. It was the funniest overall.
Very, very funny.
Obviously the costumes. And the performances in it were just
absolutely
unbelievable.
Incredible.
I mean, Katie as Puck was mind-blowingly funny. And the fight scene that was in there, that and the play within the play came the closest to Matt and Ben in terms of uninterrupted jokes.
Funny,
where people were missing stuff because they were still laughing at what they had seen 30 seconds earlier.
That was good.
It just worked. And that was the most pleasurable directing experience I've had.
Yeah.
In
working
that
with
way.
Great people.
And then Merry Wives was just, you know, looked great and very
fantastic.
Solid.
Looked great.
Very solid show.
Great,
the performances were
great
wonderful.
Theme.
Bobby was just a masterpiece in it. You know, that moment where Bobby was in the buck basket.
Perfect.
And it just started rolling away on its own with him just sort of staying angry as it just rolled away.
The beauty of working on a lawn space as opposed to in an actual stage.
Right, it's flat.
You have no choice. You roll with the punches.
You roll,
really.
that's how I roll.
Physically roll. Our Romeo and Juliet was the only production of Romeo and Juliet I've ever seen that's funny. That I, again, am a strong believer as a director that you make an audience laugh, they are going to love the characters, which again is what we do, I think, so well as striving artists, is getting the audience on board with the charm of the characters and of the people who are portraying these people. For me, there is nothing more magical than Matt and Thera together. They are the most non-traditional Romeo and Juliet. They are gave a really incredible, awkward 14, 15-year-old love, which is what Romeo and Juliet is. And we were able to really play on that.
For me, the moment with Thera was when he gave her the mixtape and that she sort of turned and was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
You know, it's just something about that.
The way you would when you got a mixtape from the guy that you liked.
Bill Donnelly experience. Mondays and other plays.
Yep.
We wanted to do some shorts of his.
Yep.
I reached out to him. He sent me just a pile, and said, pick what you want.
Yeah,
Mondays
and Other Plays, greatest. I love Bill Donnelly. Anything that he does, I think is gold.
Great.
I'm really, really proud of that again as well. But it was all comedy except for the last piece. Again, tearjerker.
Their Life in the Car.
My formula.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
But that was
Classic
Mondays
piece.
and Other Plays, fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Love was a situation where I and Savannah, we were directed by John Barry at Theater to Go, doing Act 1 of Love. And we felt like we wanted to do it again. It was complicated. I mean, that said,
great show.
the performance was really very good.
Great show.
It was really very, very good.
Yep. So, Magnetic North.
Magnetic North. I mean, so that was one where I wanted to do something small. I wanted to remind myself of what it was like when I was directing in college, basically. And it cuts to the bone.
Yeah.
And that show was the most rewarding in terms of me being able to get back to, oh my God, we're doing character work. The biggest example of that for me was that, it's about a miscarriage. Among other things, it's about infidelity.
Yeah.
To a certain degree, it's about mental illness. And the character of the mother is meant to have started a baby book during the pregnancy. And we don't really see it or anything like that. But there was a rehearsal where Kelsey came in and she showed it to me, and she had actually made this thing. And I mean, clearly, just thinking about it.
Yeah, is emotional.
But that something about that was the commitment to really getting into the place that you need to be to do that kind of thing was such a validation of why did we start this?
Right.
What was it that I enjoyed about directing?
Yeah, it was
And the herding cats and all of that is not the reason that you do it.
No.
That kind of thing is the reason that you do it.
Yeah, agreed.
Speaking to what you said a minute ago about that you made it a comfortable place where people had permission to have an emotional reaction to something if they chose to, and how 10 years after we had started with the intention of forcing people to feel something by pushing their buttons, that to a certain degree shows a bit of the evolution of what we have gradually done, where you can still make people feel uncomfortable, but it needs to be in a situation where they're not on the spot, or where it feels like it's communal, and that we can talk about it afterwards if they're so inclined, or something like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah, that's sort of, I think, a good.
Good
that had
point.
a good shape. I mean, 10 years is a long time. I had more hair when we started. I realized that I was going back and looking at photos from like Too Much Pudding, of like the one me sitting on the bench with Becca, and I was like, you can't see any skin through that at all. How did that happen?
We're getting old.
Yeah, no, that's true. But or we already are. But it's okay, because so is the company. Company is older.
It's a decade.
Right. Although, as we said earlier, I'm not sure whether or not we've actually had 10 solid years of work, of product.
Or any good.
Right, yes, right. Anything that, but it's there. So, hope you enjoy our new box set.